Yes, people, welcome back to Mission Podcast. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, a current UFC fighter who has fought in the middleweight and light heavyweight division, a man who's been in there with some of the best in the world, from his college football days at Alabama to making a name for himself in MMA. Please welcome Eryk Anders. Eryk, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing awesome, man.
I just wanted to touch on your recent fight with Christian Leroy Duncan. It didn't go the way you hoped, but what are some of the positives you can take from that performance, and what's next for you?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure there are any positives. You know, it was first round knockout. Um, it is what it is. You know, that's just the name of the game. You know, live by the sword, die by the sword. You know, I've done that to a lot of people, and you know,
Yeah.
if you do this sport long enough, it's a matter of time before it happens to you, I guess.
Yep. I mean, it's well known you started out as a linebacker playing college football before you transitioned into MMA. I just wanted to ask, how did you think playing football helped you transition into MMA, if it did at all?
Um, well, I think like athletically, you know, you spend your whole life, you know, developing your body to be athletic. You know, short area quickness. You know, you lift, you're explosive, all those things. So you spend your whole life like fine tuning your body, and then from a discipline standpoint, you know, I'm a very structured person. You know, I do like the same thing and very regimented as well. You know, I kind of do the same things at the same time every day. Um, and I'm a little bit OCD at this point. Like if I'm late for a workout, if I'm running late to a workout or whatever, you know, I kind of, you know, I'm upset about it. You know, so I think, you know, you spend your whole life developing your body to be an athlete, and then, you know, you kind of live this regimented life. Like I have to go to class at this time, then I have to eat at this time, then I have to go get treatment, then I have to go to practice, and I have to watch film, and I have to do boom, boom, boom. You know, and it's kind of the same thing. You know, you just substitute uh, one thing for another. You know.
Yeah. I mean, others have also transitioned from American football into combat sports. Some have gone into MMA and even wrestling. Out of curiosity, was professional wrestling ever something you considered, and were you ever interested in it?
Yeah, you know, of course. You know, when I was growing up, WWF was that's what it was back then. Uh, you know, that's probably when it was at its peak. You
Yeah.
know, the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, uh, Domination Nation. You know, all those guys. So yeah, it would have been cool, but you know, I just really didn't know an avenue to be able to pursue that. And I always liked, you know, wrestling, like real wrestling, like you know, high school, college, like folk style wrestling.
Yeah.
And you know, I fought a lot growing up, so this was just kind of like
Yeah.
a natural evolution to go this direction.
Yeah. Like talking about training and preparing for a fight, what's one thing that fans would be surprised that you do different to other fighters?
That I do different than other fighters. I don't know. I think everybody kind of has their own train of thought on preparing for a fight. I used to when I was younger. I used to like kill myself in the gym if I didn't leave each training session exhausted. I feel like I wasn't doing enough. And then the UFC started putting a lot of money behind the research of you know maximizing the athlete's performance, and I realized that I was doing it wrong. I was doing too much, so I actually like backed off the intensity when I get ready for a fight. Um, and you know, I kind of what's the word? Like some days it'll be like super intense. Other days it'll just be more drilling. Some practices are you know really hectic. Sometimes other practices are you know more drilling based. So I'm not you know necessarily killing myself, but I'm also getting better, um, and I'm able to recover in between training sessions.
Yeah.
Sorry there, Eryk. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
I just wanted to ask you, do you have any like pre-fight rituals or superstitions?
uh, Not really. I wear the same draws for all my fights, you know, and you know I'm 500 in the UFC, so I'm not even sure how much that actually helps or whatever. But like I was telling him earlier, like I'm a creature of habit. Like I just do the same things at the same time every day. Like I'm not hard to find, at from 9:30 in the morning to 11, I'm at the gym, from 2 to 3 in the afternoon, I'm in the gym, and then again at night. And then if I'm not there, I'm usually at the house or, doing business things. So I pretty much live my life like Groundhog's Day. It's the same thing every day, pretty much with the same people. So, my life really isn't that complex.
Fair enough, Eryk. Craig wants to ask you something, I think.
Yeah, Eryk, if you don't mind, I jump in there. Am I right in saying you've only got one fight left on your contract?
That's right. That'll put me at 20 UFC fights, and I think that's a good number to leave out on. It's definitely a lot more than most fighters get. So,
Yeah.
and I've been very fortunate to be around this long. I've made plenty of money to live life outside and invest it well into other things. So yeah, there's like no pressure to keep fighting.
Good, man. Will that be you for combat sports? No other ventures?
What was that?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So will that be you for combat sports then after the UFC? No other ventures or?
I don't know. Money talks. I would love to do boxing matches. Against athletes that come from different sports into combat sports like boxing or a YouTuber maybe. So that kind of thing I'm definitely interested in. But MMA, I don't really know. I love the sport. I'll still be teaching it after I'm done fighting, so I'll still be involved in the sport. But as far as like cutting all that weight and training like I do, I don't know if that's something that's going to be on the table. But everything has a price. So even if the UFC came to me and was like, "Yo, you won your 3 out of your last 4. Here's a new contract with more money," then it would definitely be something to think about.
Money talks, eh? Money talks.
Yeah.
You've been fighting in the UFC since 2017, and you've beat some great names. Is there opponent that you wish you fought, which you didn't really get the opportunity to?
Nah, I don't think so. I just I look at every opponent as a world beater and somebody it's going to be stiff competition. So I've had a good run. I fought some names. Yeah, no, I'm pretty satisfied with my career and who I fought and how I've done.
Hi, Eryk. I just want to ask you. Obviously, being in MMA, you have to be very thick-skinned and mentally strong. I think you've talked about that before. Just want to ask you, how do you deal with like all the noise, like online fans, critics? When you go through maybe not one of your best fights, how do you like deal with that pressure, or do you just not feel it?
Not really. I think that the biggest critics and the people who talk the loudest are people who have never done nor would ever do what I do. So what does their opinion matter to me? I think, well, not I think, but I saw Denzel Washington say something about that, about people. It's like, why do I care? Like what somebody says that has never done what I've done or did what I did, So whatever, you can say what you want to say, but unless you've walked a mile in those shoes, then what does your opinion matter? Even if you have, it is what it is. The outcome was the outcome. People can say what they want, and it's your life. I have to live it. I have to walk in those shoes. No one's more upset after a loss or a poor performance than I am. No one's a tougher critic than I am. The words they choose to describe a performance may be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, what difference does it make?
Eryk, you fought Thiago Santos in Brazil. Was that intense, the environment and the fans? Because Brazilians have some great fans.
Yeah, I love the Brazilian fans. I think they're some of the most passionate in the world. It doesn't matter if you fight a Brazilian in Brazil, which if you fight in Brazil is probably what you're going to do. The whole crowd, is telling you you're going to die on the way to the cage, and during the whole fight. But after the fight, all the fans, top to bottom, they all show a lot of love and respect. So it's cool for me. It's part of the game. It's like an away game in football. Like when we played LSU, they were like little. I remember driving by, driving through the campus to get to the stadium, and I look over and there's a baby. I can't see the baby because it's in a stroller, but just out of nowhere, like a little, 1-year-old middle finger comes sticking up out of the stroller, and all you can see is like from the wrist down. I was like, oh, dude, that's great. And yeah. So, away games are cool. They're fun. And yeah, I love fighting in Brazil.
While we're on that topic, Eryk, I'd like to ask you a question. I like to ask fighters this because it's always interesting to see, up and coming fighters. Is there anyone from your gym that you think we should keep an eye out for who's going to be in the UFC soon? Just somebody that you've got a lot of hype behind, or somebody you think would do well.
Absolutely. There's a girl who trains here. Her name is Anna Crutchfield. And I think she's gonna be the next big thing. Her last fight, she head kicked a girl, knocked her out, or put her on on skates, and then finished her with the hands. So it's not common that you see women knocking out other women, especially at 115 pounds. So.
Yeah,
Man, she's got hands. She's aggressive. She comes forward. She can wrestle. She can do it all. So, and she's young too. So I think, for sure by this time next year, you'll see her with a couple UFC wins.
Eryk, we know you transitioned from football to MMA. Was there a specific fighter or even a fight that drew you into MMA?
I don't think so. I remember like watching it in college. My roommate at the time was a huge UFC fan. And, back then it only came on like once every other month or, once a month or something like that. It wasn't on like it is now. And I remember, I think it was Machida and Shogun fighting. And I was like, damn. And then, being arrogant too, I was like 22 at the time. I was like, man, I could beat those guys up. And then I got a chance to fight Machida. So that was cool for that to kind of come full circle.
Eryk, obviously, I think you got into MMA from 2012, I believe. What would you say has changed the most about the sport compared to when you first broke into it to now?
Man, I think that MMA is the fastest growing sport in the world, man. You got guys like, Peyton Talbot or Patty Pimblett or, whatever, who've, they're only, 23, 24, 25 years old, but they've been training, since they were 6. When I was growing up, everybody played football, baseball, basketball, wrestled, or did things like that. Now kids aren't even playing those sports. They're like wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu and boxing, and they're training for MMA, at 5, 6 years old. So by the time they are, 25, 26 years old, they got 20 years of training under their belt. And I just think that's crazy. But you also see the level of MMA accelerating at the same pace, And I think it's because of that, because the sport is growing so fast, so much, parents are putting their kids in this for like, maybe their kids will, overweight or they lack confidence or for whatever reason, maybe the kid just likes it. But this is an actual avenue of sports that kids are playing now and doing rather than the ball sports and the team sports.
Do you have kids yourself, Eryk?
I do. I have a 16-year-old.
Boy, girl?
Son. Yeah, son.
So would you be open to him doing MMA? Would you mind if he did, or?
I don't know, dude. He that's a decision he has to make. He wears his own shoes. He really loves football and he loves wrestling. And even when he started doing that, I told him, I was like, yo, if you don't like this, don't feel because I did it. You have to do it. You have to wear your own shoes. You have to make your own way. You have to make your own name. You have to do what you're passionate about. And it's like that for MMA too. Like there's no pressure for him to do this.
Yeah.
There was no pressure for him to play football or wrestle or do the things that I did. I'm like lucky enough that he likes doing those things because, I can relate and talk to him about football. And, he's in he's a sophomore in high school. He's, playing varsity as a sophomore, which is pretty impressive. And, I think he's a much better athlete than I am.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Find your own path sort of thing.
So, Yeah, if he wants to, it's okay. It's whatever. If he doesn't, that's okay too.
Yeah. Eryk, we have some massive Cobra Kai fans on this channel. I mean, some fans might not know this about you, but you did make an appearance on Cobra Kai, alongside big names like Johnny Lawrence. How did the opportunity come about, and what was the experience like compared to fighting?
It was awesome. Well, really, I got that opportunity because they're starting to film a lot of movies here in Birmingham because it's way cheaper to film them here than anywhere else. And some guys came into the gym. They were filming a movie called Embattled with Steven Dorff, and the stunt coordinator for that movie become the stunt director for Cobra Kai. So we had a pretty good relationship with him at the gym, and then he came to my head coach Chris Conley and was like, "Yo, we're looking for a big Mexican guy who can fight, and I'm not Mexican, but I can pass." So just like most things in the world, it's like who you know. So that's how I got that opportunity.
So, Eryk, is that a possible avenue you want to explore after your MMA career is done? Acting, maybe?
Yeah, it would be cool. I'm open to anything. I'd like to explore all options and opportunities. So yeah, of course, if that comes across the table again, then I'll jump on it every rep.
Eryk, what's been your proudest achievement in MMA?
I think the amount of fights I've had, there's a lot of, I think the average career span in the UFC is like 3 fights or a year or something like that. So, my next fight will be my 20th fight. So, that's like 4 or 5 careers in one and 8 years. So, it's just been awesome. It's been a cool ride. Beating a former champion in Chris Weidman, finding another one in Machida. I don't think there's just one particular moment in MMA that is my proudest moment, but it's been a cool ride.
And Eryk, are you an avid watcher of the UFC yourself?
Yeah, I love MMA. I watch everything from amateur fighters all the way to the UFC and everything in between.
So
PFL,
if I could ask
local
you,
shows, regional shows.
if I could ask you who excites you the most in the UFC right now, who would you say?
I mean, I really watch the middleweight division the most, obviously because it's my division, but I can't think of his name, but there's a kid from Cameroon that trains in England now.
Is it Oteba Gautier?
Yeah, he's got the little dreads. I think they're blonde.
Yeah.
Zero body fat, just knocks everybody out. I think that guys like that are going to be the next big thing, just simply because he has all the physical attributes. He's got power, he got speed, and he's patient, and he's patient, and he seems to be intelligent. Like his last fight, he had the guy hurt multiple times, but he didn't rush in and just waited for his shot to end the fight. And I think that he could probably knock out anybody. Haven't seen him wrestle a whole lot, but guys like him are the reason why I'm walking out the door.
Obviously, Eryk, you've mentioned your college football background. Why do you think playing football is such a great base for an athlete? Because if you think about it, you're one of many stars that have made the transition from football into MMA, even WWE. I've got a question for you: was WWE ever like a thing that you considered going into, or?
Yeah, but the difference is they're like with fighting, I just fought until the UFC called me. I don't know if it's like that for WWE. So like I'm not saying it's like an easier avenue, an easier path to get to the UFC, but it's paved a little bit better. You just keep fighting. I was knocking everybody out coming up, so they really like that. When I first got in the UFC, there wasn't as many football players to make that transition. I think they just signed a kid that played for the 49ers off the Contender Series a few days ago. So you're starting to see those guys make that transition from high level ball sports into MMA, and I think that's awesome.
Eryk, do you notice the difference between American football and MMA as in physical presence?
Yeah, because football, I tell my son all the time, you can't teach size. You know, you can't teach somebody to be 6'5", 300 pounds, or 6'4", 260 or whatever. You know, each position kind of has like a physique and a body stature that they want. MMA, it doesn't matter what you look like. You see guys like the Torrance Finney. You know, he's probably the shortest dude in the middleweight division, rack up wins. Then you see guys like the Cameroonian kid that I can't pronounce his name, but you know they're opposite, you know, stature wise. But they both have success, you know. So like MMA it's not dictated so much by size, but by skill, grit, you know, and those things.
Eryk, just want to ask you, when it's all said and done, looking years from now, what would you want people to like say about you, not only as just a fighter, but as a person as well?
He showed up every time. He gave everything he had. You know, the cards didn't always fall in his favor, but you know, he still showed up, put on entertaining fights, and you know, put everything into it.
Eryk, we like to ask this to all our guests. If there was one actor you could cast as Eryk Anders in a movie, who would it be?
Shoot. I don't know. That kid probably ain't even been born yet. You know, I know The Rock just did Mark Kerr. I don't know too many. Terrence Howard, maybe. I don't know how many like light skinned black guys there are in Hollywood right now, but you know, somebody like that.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Eryk, is there anything that you would change about the UFC?
I think the only thing that I would change is like the show and win money. I think I should get all of that because just because I'm getting paid the win, or you know what I mean, I'm not if I'm getting paid everything, I'm not gonna fight any harder, or any like I'm not gonna not fight as hard because I know my purse is guaranteed, you know. Like I don't want to lose a fight. I'm not gonna do it on purpose. I'm gonna try just as hard no matter what. So I don't know what the rationale is behind the show and win, but that's probably the one thing that I would change is I should get all my money because I showed up, I made weight, I went in there and I gave it everything I had.
Eryk, the UFC have announced a new deal with Paramount worth, $6 billion. Are you happy with this, and do you think it was long overdue?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's awesome that you know the UFC is putting the sport on a worldwide basis, you know, on a worldwide platform. You know, it was cool to have it on ESPN. You know, growing up, ESPN was like where all the sports were at, you know. So that's cool. Um, yeah, and then obviously with, you know, them signing a bigger deal, the money has to flow downhill. You know, I just can't see fighter pay being increased and things like that. So I don't see any downside to the UFC signing a $6 billion deal. I think they had a $2 billion or $4 billion deal with the ESPN or whatever the money was, and you know I think he for sure saw fighter pay increase. So now it should, you know, and also I think it'll attract better athletes. You know, there's a lot of great athletes, but like now that like the pay is going up and it's you know you can actually make a living off of it. You know, I think you'll see people start steering away from, you know, football and sports like that and go into MMA.
Eryk, obviously, I think you've mentioned you want to open your own gym and do some coaching. What advice would you give then to the next generation of fighters or young people coming up in MMA today?
Invest your money. You know, I think the problem with a lot of athletes is they think that money's going to last forever and they're going to keep fighting, they're going to keep playing, they're going to keep making money. And then, you know, like look at Brian Battle. He just got cut because he missed weight or whatever, and he was on like a 6-fight winning streak, or he was like 6-1 in the UFC or something like that. And so he could have fought, but for whatever reason, or not for whatever reason, he didn't see that coming. You know what I mean? So I think that happens to a lot of, athletes in general. So then, you're used to making this kind of money, then the next day you're not making that kind of money, but then you've accumulated all this. You probably bought a house, a car, things like that. So you have this monthly bill that you can't afford anymore. So now I'm not saying that's the case for Brian Battle. I'm just using him as an example. He was doing really good, and now he's not in the UFC. So what promotion is going to pay like the UFC? So obviously, no matter what he does, he's probably going to take a pay cut. So yeah, invest your money, spend it wisely, and plan for the future.
And do you think, Eryk, that a lot of the UFC might be missing out on talent simply because outside of the UFC? Do you think these fighters are struggling to pay bills and they just think, you know what, forget MMA, I'm going to do something else?
Nah, I don't, because there's only room for so much at the top. Like football, for example. I can go to the north side of Birmingham right now and go to any street corner, and I could probably pick up. You could probably see, out of 10 kids, you could probably see like 4 or 5 that could have played in college or in the NFL, but through life or choices that they made or whatever, they didn't make it, and that's just kind of the natural selection of sports, Like when I first started, I was working. I would get up in the morning, train, go to work all day, go to school to be a firefighter, come back, train at night. I wasn't coming home till I was going to train at like 5 in the morning. I wasn't coming home till like 10, 11 at night.
Wow.
So I paid my dues to get where I'm at now, and if you're not willing to do that, then I don't think that you can say that you really want to be a fighter. You're willing to do what it takes to make it, because sometimes that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Eryk, just before you let you go, we know you're a big wrestling fan. If there was a theme song you would walk out to, which one would it be?
A theme song? Well, I always walk out to Set It Off by Lil Boosie. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, but you should give it a listen if you're not.
And would you like to play the good guy or the bad guy in wrestling, if you could choose?
I don't have too much of a bad guy vibe to me, I don't think. But I guess it depends who you ask. But I could do both, But the good guy always wins in wrestling, so I like to win, so I like to get some dubs.
You never know, Eryk. We could see you in the WWE at some point.
Let's see.
But yeah, Eryk, is that all you have time for then today?
Yeah, I'm class is finna start, so I gotta go put on my gi and getting ready for a World's Jiu-Jitsu tournament next week. So
absolute pleasure talking to you, Eryk.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate it, Eryk. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do it.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Good luck.
Mate. Take care. Bye-bye.